Okay, we're here today for it. Oh, hold on. This is Monkey Bites, isn't it? Monkey Bites, Net Monkeys Monkey Bites with Grafton International for International Women's Day, isn't it? So there we go. Hi, we're here for Net Monkeys Monkey Bites today with Grafton International CFO Heather Seaman, and we're doing a podcast for International Women's Day.
So welcome, Heather. Well, thanks, Net Monkeys. Thanks, Cass. Thanks for having me. So, as you say, I'm actually FD at Grafton International, and I look after technology, procurement and finance for the business. Been there for 2 years now, but I think I'm about 20 years into my finance career, which makes me feel really old.
That's brilliant. So you haven't always worked at Grafton, have you? You've worked with a number of industries as well. So how have you found it different to working kind of where you were before to this new industry as well?
Yes, so I've deliberately tried to work across a number of industries, really kind of purposeful in my career to try and shape myself so that I've got a full toolkit. So when I took the step to FD, I felt like I had an array of experiences to draw upon. So prior to Grafton's, I was at Riviera Travel, private equity-backed travel company, where I was group financial controller. Very different kind of feel, very different financial backing, and as such, kind of working at a different pace. Prior to that, I've been working with companies such as Specsavers in commercial finance. I've worked for Molson Coors in financial planning and analysis, and also companies like Citibank, where I was lucky enough to be on the graduate scheme.
Wow. So you said there a minute ago, obviously, moving to Grafton, you do more than just finance. You obviously started setting to roll around technology and all sorts of things. How have you found that, and what's the learning curve been like?
So, yeah, really, really interesting, really exciting, and also a bit of trepidation in there because it's picking something up that I have no experience of or no direct experience in managing. So picking up procurement, I guess that fits quite nicely with finance, particularly with the financial planning and analysis side, because it's all about planning for what we need to buy. So those two work really, really hand in hand. And tech-wise, I think I was really keen for this role to have that tech experience. It is something that scared me when I took on the role, but I'm learning, and I'm learning through bringing people together and kind of facing technology as a company-wide function rather than just a function in its own right. So set up a tech forum within the business, and we're currently looking at our ERP change. And very much I'm trying to run that process with the people in mind and letting the people who use the technology make the decisions.
No, that's incredibly important as well to make sure it lands correctly. So what's the biggest, putting this is for International Women's Day, we're obviously talking about successful women and kind of the learnings we have. We've been in the game for a very long time now. And I certainly remember the days where I had to come to the office in skirt and heels and had a full face of makeup. Otherwise, it wasn't a very welcome reception. What kind of have you seen over your entire career? What do you think the biggest change has been since kind of the day you started, from your experience as a woman to kind of where you are now?
Okay, I think it's a really interesting question. And I think International Women's Day has been really interesting for me throughout my career. If I'm completely honest, it never really resonated with me, and I didn't understand why. There was an element of, I found National Women's Day, I didn't quite understand that kind of pro-bias almost, because as a woman, I want to feel equal, and this is all about equality. So I never really understood that until I did some research, and I've learned some more over time, but particularly some of the stats that you shared ahead of this, where we've kind of put some time into thinking about it. I think the key thing I've taken away from why this is important and why we should be focusing on this is if you look on the statistics around the success that's driven by having a diverse leadership or diversity within your company, the statistics don't lie. I can't remember the exact statistic.
Well, I think all of that in a second.
A huge percentage increase in performance, outperforming the market if you have that diverse leadership. So it got me really thinking that actually it does resonate with me. I think if I look at the UK economy at the moment, productivity is stagnant, and it's been stagnant for a while, and it's a real thing we need to face into. And if nothing else, there's a reason to believe in the need for this equality and for us to drive this if we want to drive the UK economy. So you asked me, where has it changed in my career? I guess I haven't felt like I have been prejudiced. I think I'm quite fortunate in that regard. I look back and I can see changes. I certainly remember times in one particular company I walked into the door and thought, crikey, there's a lot of middle-aged men in this company, and they were all they appeared, my perception at that time was this feeling of alpha male, a dominance, and I guess it kind of lent itself to a bit of an imposter feeling for me. And I remember back then I was trying to figure out, I had lots of ideas. I've always been very tenacious and extroverted, not scared of coming forward, but I really had to think about how to find my voice at that table. If I really think about it and start to dissect in the past, I've seen myself have to adapt and shape to get my voice at that table.
Yeah, I can see that. So something I always noticed as well, I'm certainly viewing, because I kind of have always worked in male-dominated industries as well, and that has changed over the years. But something, just in your point of view on it, but something I always used to see was in the room surrounded by there'd probably be 20 or 30 people in the room. And if the question was asked and the answer was no, when a woman said it, it was questioned. And it was why do you think that? But have you not considered? Yet when a man said it, no was taken. And it was, okay, let's move on. And that's I had to learn myself as well of how to assert myself, but without coming across aggressive, because that can it can lead down the wrong route as well. Is there what kind of behaviours did you have to change? How did you learn how to have that voice at the table? Because that's a skill set that people are having. They're on that journey now. Is there anything advice you can give, or anything you would say that maybe these are things you learn on the way?
Yeah, so this is just personal to me, and I think what people really need to think about is that every single person is unique, and this feeds from the gender diversity. But if you look at, say, colour insights profiling, for those who are familiar, those who aren't familiar with it, it's defining your personality and your preferences and traits and styles into a colour profile, which kind of defines your key characteristics. I know some people don't like pigeonholing, but it's a really good point of reference to help you start. So I am very mindful of that. With that comes an element of gender style preference at times. Now, I've done a bit of research into this, and I'm a big fan of the book, The Chimp Paradox. And within the Chimp Paradox, the author discusses the chimp brain, and this is the emotional response brain, and this is innate with any human. And he talks about the nuance between the male and female response in that when that area of the brain is stimulated. So it's just being mindful of these things and bringing them all together and thinking about, regardless of gender, who you're speaking to, and putting that in as part of the jigsaw. It's not the only piece. There's lots of other pieces. But I've tried to be mindful and try to be more self-aware of who the recipient is, and trying to make sure that I change my style to be able to influence and get the outcome that I think is the right outcome.
I think you're fair. We're taking a look at as well, and that can book and so you can read it ourselves. And so I did bring with me these statistics we were talking about a second ago, and I've cut them up to make them more of a surprise as we go through it. So one of the first ones we have here is that countries led by women experience 6 times fewer COVID-19 deaths. Yet globally, only 26.7% of parliamentary seats are held by women. And the UK Parliament is currently 34% female. It's a record high, but it's far from parity. Peace deals with women involved are 35% more likely to last at least 15 years, suggesting that women bring a different approaches to complex situations. How has your problem-solving approach as a woman influenced your career progression?
Again, for me, you have to take the gender as part of the bigger piece. But I think I go back to, what is the outcome we're trying to achieve? What is the group of people I'm trying to influence? What is their style, their preference, and adapting my style to that? And I'm sorry, I know I'm not focusing on the female attribute to me, but it's something that is really important that we recognise that this is one element and it's not the defining piece. I have noticed there have been times in one part of my career where we went through a very, very high pressured time. It was actually in response to COVID-19, and the board were all male, middle-aged, and there was a definite, they were all, if you were looking at colour profiling, they were all blue as well. So what we had at that point was a lot of people, decision making, who needed a lot of detail, a lot of time to reflect. If you think about the heightened depression we talked about, the chimp brain and the male influence, so what we kind of witnessed was males, high stress, a lot of testosterone, and a lot of time needed, when actually as a business we needed to cut through that and we needed to get things moving. So I felt that in those times, as the female in the room, I was able to bring that different response to that decision-making process, to maybe against that testosterone wall that was created. And actually that was able to break through. I'm actually red-led, so I would like a more pacey decision. So I was able to corral the testosterone, I felt, and give us a more methodical approach and bring some pace to that decision making.
Yes. And I say it's interesting because you say you're not really focusing on the gender there, but that's almost the point, isn't it? Is that's not the end of all the answers. It's not just what defines you, it's just what's there. And also, different genders behaving differently often isn't just because of their gender, it's actually because of the experiences they've been through. So you had a traditional upbringing with mum at home and dad out to work and things, you would have come up in that atmosphere as well. So were you learning your childhood?
Exactly.
So whilst it may point towards a gender, it's actually nothing to do with a gender, but because of lived experiences. So it's always, I think, important when you're looking like at a room full of people, actually understanding who they are and getting to know the people in the room and not just taking everything at face value.
Absolutely.
And so move on to the next one. Our next surprise out of the gigs is, in business, we know that simply having women present isn't enough. They need influential voices. How do you distinguish between tokenistic inclusion and genuine empowerment in your respective fields? So, I mean, that's a really difficult one. I often see it bands around online, and kind of the DEI and stuff is actually a very hot topic at the moment. And there's an awful lot of policy and things being rolled back. But how do you identify, how do you walk into a room? If you're applying for an interview, you're applying for an interview or you got the job, how do you know that something actually wants you as a human being? And that's kind of what we're seeing with you in your skill sets.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think we need to go back to the point on the economy here and focus on what are we trying to achieve. What we've got, kind of an equality piece and this fairness piece, which I think some people struggle to recognise purely because, like me, they may not see it, they may be naive, or they may be fortunate that they've not been exposed to it. But the thing that people all can get behind is that we drive productivity and we de-risk by having diversification. So I think we think about the question, it's asking about tokenistic versus actually hearing a voice. I think you ask about an interview, how can you tell? I think it's really, you could get the cultural feel of the company, and the responses that you're getting from the interview are all good indications of the kind of culture you're going to walk into.
Yeah, I suppose that's part of the interview as well. It isn't just the one way and kind of questioning. It's also you come back to it and going who are you as a company? You see how you actually want to work for.
So, you could use that opportunity if you're feeling kind of trepidation as a woman. Do I have a voice in this company, or will I have a voice? It's a great opportunity to explore that in that interview process and put some challenging questions out there and see what you get back. Also, what is the panel like? Who's interviewing you? Who's in front of you? Yeah. That's always a good indication.
I suppose, in the essence of it, or you're getting along with your interviewers. I've sat through plenty of interviews where it is question answer, and I had those ones where you actually end up having a chat or sharing stories and actually end up and actually bonding over the session as well. Yeah, sure, it was good. Okay, on to our next one. What? So, workplace evolution and future of work. And this is something that's really important to me, and something I've been working in the last year, especially in focusing on, is while women comprised 40% of STEM professionals in the 1980s, today that number has dropped to 20%. Women make up only 22% of the AI workforce and only 8% of the AI developers, raising serious concerns around bias in technology development. 25% fewer women receive AI training than men, so the AI-related job displacement risk is highest for women in repetitive mid-level jobs. I mean, how can women prepare and shape their careers for the future? And this is something we've spoken about previously as well, is the jobs that are actually changing due to AI coming and kind of how fast it's growing and things. And we first met over the subject of AI as well. What do you see kind of in your world? How are you helping the people you work with? How are you helping yourself? Because it's moving incredibly fast. It's actually very difficult to keep up with. As a professional in the field myself, I struggle sometimes. And you've got a hole in the job to do. Mm-hmm. So kind of what are you seeing with your starts and what are you seeing yourself in a way of kind of looking towards the future about these skill sets that are needed and all that?
So I want to pick up on the word bias that you mentioned, because I think that's really important in International Women's Day. And one of the things that I think is key on how we as people and organisations can unlock the female talent that perhaps aren't coming through the pipeline. I think one of the key blockers is this subconscious bias. We all know we've got it, but we don't, because when we need to think about it, we're not thinking about it because it's subconscious. And I discussed this actually with my husband as I was preparing for this webinar, and talking about subconscious bias and how it's impacted over our careers and where we've seen it. And he came up with a really interesting example, actually, I think is really key and helped shed some light. So he spoke about a time in his career where he was part of the diversity panel. And they were exploring this subconscious bias and trying to look across the organisation from shop floor all the way up to exec to understand where there might be the pockets of subconscious bias and where they could unlock them. And I love the example he gave. It was kind of an engineering-ish firm, and he mentioned that when they were walking the shop floor, they looked at the kind of the uniform that the people were wearing on the shop floor. And actually, it became apparent that the uniform provided were all fit for males. So the whole fit, the shape and everything. And it sounds really silly, but as a female, we have curves, we're a different body shape. And if we're going to wear uniform all day, you want to be comfortable. But what came out from exploring that was actually that the few females they did have on the shop floor are incredibly uncomfortable, experiencing real job dissatisfaction as a result of it, and not able to really be their best self at work. We all know if you're walking around with something and really tight in it, you're agitated and you're not happy and you're not powering through. And it's those tiny things that are the blocks along the way. So the other thing in terms of how do we pull people through, well, it's about having mentors, isn't it? It's about having mentors. But if you look at this and you look at the inequality we've currently got, you mentioned your parents and kind of your background. History was that dad went to work, mum stayed at home. So we have got a legacy, exec level, middle-aged man that is history dictated. And whilst we're making this change, we're feeding through the bottom of the funnel and up. It's going to take time to enact. So for me, one of the key ways, particularly with AI, etc., is for females is to find female mentors, which is kind of one of the relationships we have. I see you as my AI mentor, to help make sure we are pulling the females through to unlock this subconscious bias and make sure we're pulling these guys through. We go back to the ultimate goal with my FD hat on, is we increase the productivity in the UK economy if we do this. So it's beneficial for us all.
Okay, so our next statistic to look through is, so this is interesting. Despite evidence that companies with diverse leadership teams are 45% more likely to outperform their markets, only 10% of CEOs in large enterprises globally are women. And it's a figure that's remained stagnant for a number of years. What specific structural and cultural changes do you think are needed to break through that ceiling for London?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to where we talked about history and historical culture, or kind of expectations where the man goes out to work, the woman stays home and looks after the children. And as we've said, there's that legacy tail end of the dominance of the male middle-aged men currently in the CEO role. I think as we continue days like today, discussions like this, we'll see that year on year shift. But in the meantime, kind of things I think we need to address are the fact that both parents commonly now work.
Yeah.
And that is an issue. And that is a real issue I think we need to kind of grasp across the UK from an enterprise perspective and understand how we unlock that to facilitate either parent. And I now see that either parent could be the caregiver, but the subconscious bias, I believe, would be that the woman is. So how do we facilitate those women and men out there who are looking after children to ensure that they can perform their role and perform their role as a parent? And I think that's, COVID really gave us a bit of a push on in that, which is great. It opened up the opportunity of remote working, forced us to think differently. And I think off the back of that, for it to be successful, I think we need to be focused on output, measuring output from our people rather than their presenteeism and their time, etc. And that's tough. I think it's tough as leaders. Speaking for myself, it's something I've had to learn to change, having been very present in the office and seeing people around me. It's in building not only the trust, but as a leadership team, we have a duty to inspire and support and help people with remote working to improve that output. But I think if we can start to do things like that, we'll start to unlock that subconscious bias and we'll start to facilitate more females coming through. Also, females stop for maternity leave. Those who want to have a family and are able to have a family stop, and that is a career break that's impacted me.
Yeah.
I chose to take 2 years where I supported my father and mother in the sale of their business, but that allowed me to dedicate a lot of time to my son George and bringing him up. But that brought qualities to me, and I think I've got qualities from being a mother in my role, but it also slowed me down to my male peer group who are 2-3 years ahead of me because of that. So I think we need to be thinking of different ways and always challenging the norm. So are there ways beyond maternity leave, for example, where we could facilitate? We've shown that we can do it as mothers and fathers. When we had COVID and we had our kids at home because they couldn't go to school, and I certainly, at my time in Riviera as financial controller, I had really, really tight deadlines. Still had to hit those deadlines, and I still had to be present as a parent. And I feel like I demonstrated that it was possible. And I guess what I'm seeing and what I'm fearful is this push towards being back in the office, being present. And I don't want to see that pendulum swing too far because I fear that will impact the blockers to women wanting to progress and that movement towards shifting that CEO bias out and us seeing more women there.
And I think you're right on with that. Is where do we add value? And value isn't necessarily added between 9 and 5, solidly in an office somewhere. And that goes regardless of which gender you are. It could be the fact that you're looking after an ailing parent. It could be a number of factors that come into your life that mean maybe you start work at 10 o'clock in the morning. Maybe you need a break at 3 o'clock. But I know I specifically, I worked kind of 8 to 11 at my best.
Yeah.
That's just who I am. My output probably from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. is probably pretty poor, to be honest with you. But once I've had my day and I've got that quiet time after work, my son's gone to bed and I've got time to myself again, that's actually when I put out my most output. And I think you're definitely right in there. We can't be measuring people on their input. It must be on their output as well, because some people work faster than others. You can't measure everyone with the same yardstick. So I think absolutely right there as well. I think we have one final statistic to work through, and this one is quite an interesting one, to be fair, and it's one of the most complicated questions we have yet to answer today, which is 24% of experts quoted in the news are women, and the media coverage heavily favours men, with 82% highlighting male figures compared to the 80% focusing on women. I mean, UK studies show female leaders receive more negative coverage, focusing on their appearance and their family life more than their male counterparts. So how has media representation affected your career? What do we do to actually combat this that we're seeing?
I think this negative media representation, be it the slimmer view that females have and the presence they have in media, or also the negative slant that tends to be focused on appearance, I think that's doing nothing but suppress what we're trying to do and achieve at the moment. It's kind of something that's kind of very current for me, I think, at the moment. I'm sure people watching this have unfortunately heard of the person called Bonnie Blue. We can all have a laugh about it for those who find that funny. But that poses a real problem to me, because I see the likes of Bonnie Blue being interviewed and she's presenting herself, or trying to present herself, as a really powerful woman.
Mm.
She is taking the fact that she is earning money as a sign of success. And for me, success is much broader than that.
Yeah.
Money's one part of it. It's about your impact that you leave around people that you touch and you're in contact with. Is about the imprint you leave your family, etc. And what will people remember you by? One of the things in my kind of current training at the moment, my management training, is focused on for goal setting in life, and off that you get the more shorter term, medium term goals. If you had your 80th birthday party, during that speech, if you had a member from your family giving a speech, you had a colleague giving a speech, and you had someone from your community giving a speech about you, for those 3 different people, reflect on what would you want them to say about you. Now, this has been kind of pivotal for me in my career, because my family dynamic works, and it's really shaped how the decisions I make and what I'm doing currently, and kind of my value sets. And I think that's absolutely key to this point here. So it's really, really tough. And we're faced with people like Bonnie Blue who are undoing everything that we're trying to do. Remember, at the very start, we talked why we're trying to do this. Why should everyone be behind it? Because it's for everyone's benefit, regardless of your gender, race, age. It doesn't matter. We all benefit by breaking through this barrier. We need to stop giving airtime to people like that.
I think that's a fair point as well, because we'll often have the kind of conversation with people and a bit of a debate around kind of, it's only fair to give everyone a voice. And I don't believe that. I think there's destructive voices out there, and you actually do better as a world to kind of go, actually, you know what, I'm not going to give you the time. We've invented something over the last few years, I was going to put a decade actually, called influencers. We never had those before on social media, and they are paper-thin personalities that don't add a lot, and they're not people out there necessarily that are out there, helping young people grow. They're not positive influencers. They're based around kind of short form attention span things. It's about way things look. And if you look at, the attention Bobby Brown's been getting recently around the way she looks. She turned up at an event looking absolutely stunning, and she was torn to pieces because she didn't look the way people wanted her to. No one addressed her actual skill set. No one actually focused on any of that. It really was how she physically presented herself. And she made a fantastic post where she actually called out every single journalist, every single person who had made these comments about her and what they had said. And she'd received apologies, which shows that people do know this is wrong and they shouldn't be doing that. But because it gets them short-term attention and gets them some few quick laughs, they're doing this stuff, but they don't think about the impact it has actually, not just on the individual themselves, but also people witnessing it. So I think it's like you say, it's all about equality. Everyone actually benefits from these things, and these voices are incredibly important. It might be a short-term effect that people are actually aiming for, but the long-term effects are really damaging. And I personally would love to see more women out there who are complimented on their skill sets and how smart they are and the positive impacts, and what you're saying about the different roles that you play in life. I certainly wouldn't want my colleagues to speak about me in the same way I want my son to talk about me. I'm 2 different people in that respect of who I present myself as. But it's certainly a challenging thing. There's a lot of voices we're facing against. What's one of the major things that you think people out there can actually do to help this? Because we're talking about everyday people here. We're not necessarily Instagram influencers with a major following. What kind of like to me and you actually do out in the wide world that kind of help this process along?
So I think from a male perspective, for any males out there who are thinking, okay, I'm hearing you, there's a real benefit here, what can I do? I would say put yourself out there for the groups who are supporting the likes of International Women's Day. Be an advocate, be the male advocate that helps pull it through the organisation. We need a pull through organisations, through societies, through government bodies. It needs to be pulled through. So I would say look for any subconscious bias out there, go into work tomorrow and have a look around and think, what am I missing here? What is that subconscious bias piece? What is that uniform that's not fitting? And what can I do to unlock that? If you're a manager, have a think about who are the kind of the rising talent females in the business, who can I go out there and mentor? And kind of conversely for the females, find your voice. Don't be afraid to speak up and be heard, and look for the supporters out there. Find that mentor who is going to help bring you through.
Okay, so say thank you for coming and doing this today. Really appreciated you having here. We've got some swag we pulled together in the obby, give you. So of course, for your little one, there is a monkey. Obviously, thank you, Tia, that one. And I've got a couple of boxes here, and there is a branded mug for you from today. Perfect. And then some other little bits as well we hope you like as well.
Oh, super. Thank you.
And we'll end on that note with that lovely in the year was there. Thank you very much, Heather, for joining us. And for everyone else, this has been Net Monkeys Monkey Bites.